So I'll go ahead and get started. So welcome to today's panel of current students to learn all about their experiences here at Lund and student life. We have a great panel set up for you here today. My name is Audrey Savage, and I am an International Communications Officer in the International Recruitment Office. So I'll be moderating our panel here today. And just a few little housekeeping notes before we get started and introduce our panel. First is that at any point during the session, if you have any questions, that's what we're here for, is to answer your questions. So please post them in the Q&A, which is at the bottom of the screen. And there's also an upvote feature or a little thumbs up like button. So if you see that someone has already posted the same question you have, you can actually press that like button and it will pop it up to the top of the list so we can make sure to get to that. So please feel free to ask us all your questions there. Because we are here with current students today, we will not be taking questions about the application process because we want to reserve our time, of course, to hear from our students about their experience. Application questions are better directed to our staff. So we actually do have two different events today about how to apply, one for bachelor's programs and one for master's that you can join that will walk you through all the steps about how to apply later in the day, as well as several of those events coming up in the next few weeks. So if you have application questions, I direct you to join us at one of those events so you can talk to staff. And I'll actually post now in the chat a few links that'll be useful to you throughout our chat here today. And at the bottom there is actually the link where you can sign up for our other virtual events if you want to sign up for a how to apply webinar. But without further ado, I'd love to introduce our panelists and get us started. So we'll go around and perhaps if everyone can share a little bit about who you are, where you're from, what you study, that sort of thing. We can start with Heewon.
Okay, hello, I'm Heewon from South Korea, and I'm studying master program in warfare policies and management.
Great. Trevina?
Hi, I'm Trevina. I'm from the US, and I'm studying the master's program in virtual reality and augmented reality.
Thank you. Catalina?
Hi, my name is Catalina. I'm from Colombia. I'm a student master in public health.
Aga?
Hi, my name is Aga. I'm from Poland and I'm doing bachelor's in development studies.
And Livius?
Hi, I'm Livius. I'm from Romania and UK, and I'm doing my master's in biology.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. So perhaps to start us off, I would love to hear what brought you to Lund, or what made you choose Lund in the first place when you were deciding to search for your studies abroad, or maybe not abroad first. Maybe we'll go around the opposite way and we'll start with you, Livius.
So I was looking at different countries in Europe. I was mainly focused on Germany and Sweden because of the research and the scientific expertise in a way, so from relating to my field. Also actually because of the costs of the education, the costs of living, it was a bit cheaper here than it was for me to stay back in the UK. And I also love traveling to different countries for my courses and to learn, because I've done that quite a while now. And I think it's really rewarding to go to different countries because it really makes you think in so many different ways. And I think for most, if not all fields, it's a benefit. But yeah.
Great, thank you. And Aga, how about you? You're our only bachelor student here today, so I think it's especially interesting how you decided to do your bachelor's abroad.
At first, the thing is, I wanted to go to the States and pursue my bachelor's there, but then I kind of shifted my focus and what I wanted to study and started searching for universities in Europe. So the options that I was considering were mostly like, UK, the Netherlands. And at the time, I also started being more interested in Scandinavian culture. So I thought that maybe, one of the Nordic countries would be an option. But I was kind of afraid of the costs and about tuition fees, but then it turned out that it's completely free. So it was an incentive. And it was really high in international rankings, especially the program that I'm studying. So I thought it was the perfect choice.
Great, and that's a good thing to point out that if you're joining us today from an EU country and you're an EU citizen, it is tuition free here in Sweden. So I know that's a big helping point for a lot of students. If you're joining from a non-EU country though, there is tuition fees, just to make the difference there clear. Catalina, how about you? What brought you to Lund and to Sweden?
I was looking for studying abroad for a while, and then I have an special interest in the Nordic countries as well as Germany. So I started to do my research and I found Lund, and I found the program really interesting. And since my interest is in public health and also the research, I said it's a really good choice. So actually it was my first choice here in Sweden. And here I am. And as you said, yeah, for people that is not from the EU, we have to pay. So in my case, I also applied for the Global Lund Scholarship, and yeah, so that helps a lot.
Definitely a great point there. Trevina, what's your Lund story?
Yeah, so I came to Lund from the Netherlands. Actually, I studied there for my bachelor's, and I had wanted to stay there, but the tuition fees, because I'm from the US, were quite expensive, like more expensive than here in Sweden. But the main draw really was the program, Bachelor's in Virtual and Augmented Reality. I did find one in the Netherlands, but it was like quite general about creative technologies. But I really just wanted to focus like in these two specific ones. So that was really my main motivating factor. To be honest, though, I wish Lund was located further north in Sweden because I love the cold, but you know.
I think you're quite alone there.
Yeah, because I'm from upstate New York, so I miss my very cold winters. But hey, the program is pretty good so far, so I'm happy.
That makes sense. Yeah, I have lived more farther north in Sweden. I do miss the snow sometimes, but for those in the audience who haven't looked too deeply yet into where Lund is located, we're right on the bottom tip of Sweden. So we get the least harsh in terms of coldness and snow, at least winter, as you can get in Sweden. And we're about 35 minutes or so on the train away from Copenhagen Airport. So you also have a bit of Denmark kind of in the region here as well. Great. And Heewon, what brought you to Lund?
So 3 years ago, I did an exchange study in Sweden. And that time I was also studying social work, and not only from the theoretical like courses and learning, I could feel like really equal society in Sweden, and also could see how people get benefit from social work system, and also amazing experience for me. So I wanted to learn in depth and in detail about social policies and welfare system of Sweden. And I was looking for a master program that I can learn those kind of things. And Lund University was the only one having the best program I was looking for. So that's why I chose Lund University.
Great. A lot of very similar, but also very nuanced reasons there for that everyone found Lund. So it's great that you did all find us in the end. So now I'm wondering, of course, this is maybe a bit cheesy to ask, but what is your favorite thing so far about studying at Lund? Can be either about Lund as a university or just about Sweden as a whole, just sort of the thing that sticks out as one of the most special things so far about being here. I guess we can go back around the other way. So Heewon, we'll start with you this time.
First of all, I really love the clean air in Sweden, because I'm from Seoul in Korea, which is very like busy and crowded and like city. So I really enjoy clean air and more like nature part in Lund. And also I really love the Hogwarts vibe buildings, especially the main library, like the picture you're using as background is like what surprised me the most when I first arrived in Lund, like, oh, so beautiful, I'm gonna like study in this building, it will motivate me a lot like this. So I think that's my favorite thing, studying in Lund, nature and buildings.
Oh, perfect. I also love the Hogwarts vibe, if that's not evidenced by my Hogwarts mug I've been sipping coffee from this whole session. Great. Trevina, what about you? What's your favorite thing about Lund?
Well, I will just like comment on Heewon. I wish I could study at the Hogwarts vibe building. I have like red brick buildings because I study at the engineering faculty. But what we do lack in buildings, we make up for in student life. And that for me was the most surprising thing, because I was not aware of like of the student unions. So I think LTH has like student unions for all majors, and mine is D Guilds, and we're known for like our overalls and our crazy introductory weeks. It's like 5-week long period of like activities, getting to know people. And for me, that was like really nice, especially after COVID, you know, just being able to interact with people and have fun outdoors. And yeah, that to me is the big draw, like the student life in general.
Definitely. The guilds at LTH, everyone, even if you don't study at LTH is our abbreviation, my apologies, for the Faculty of Engineering, you will definitely know who they are after the first few weeks. You see everyone running around in their different colored overalls for sure. Great. Catalina?
Well, in my case, I'm living in Malmo because the campus is also in Malmo. Tip that you have to know if you're interested in this program. And overall, I like the fact I can walk, or the public transport is also quite easy to use. And if I want to commute between Lund and Malmo, it's easy. So I like that. I like the fact that I have the choice to do whatever I want. I live close to the campus, not that close, but I live close enough to walk. And I really enjoy that. I'm from a country that we don't have seasons precisely, so I also enjoy the seasons here, how every season make the landscape change in a really, it's really impressive. I mean, the same landscape is changing all the time and it's beautiful in each season. And even though here is snowing too much, you can still enjoy the snow. And if you are like me, that you come from a country without no snow at all, you're gonna enjoy it too much. And from the studies, I would say I like so far, the system is quite different, of course, but also the fact that you can share with a lot of people from everywhere in the world. So my master's is quite international, so I meet people from everywhere, and you can learn a lot of them, both socially and also in the studies. So yeah.
Wonderful. Some great points there. For anyone who doesn't know, we have 3 campuses here at Lund. So the main Lund campus is where the majority, I think everyone here today except Catalina studies. It's where I would say 95% of the programs are. But we also have several campuses in Malmö, where Catalina is. Malmö is the 3rd largest city in Sweden, and it's about 15 or so minutes by train away. So it's quite close. Which is nice anyway, even if you're not studying in Malmö, to have access to a bit of a bigger city close by. But the Masters in Public Health, as well as all of our fine and performance arts programs, are located in Malmö. And then we also have a campus a bit north of us in Helsingborg, which is about 30 minutes away by train. And that hosts all of our service management programs, strategic communication, and energy efficient and environmental building design. I hope I didn't miss one there. I think that's everyone. But great. Aga, how about you? What's been your favorite thing about Lund or about Sweden?
Well, I genuinely love living in Sweden, to be honest. But when it comes to Lund and my studies and just the student life in general right here, I think my favorite thing are the nations, because it was kind of like a foreign concept to me when I first moved in here. We don't have anything that would be similar to student nations back at home in Poland. And the only thing that came to my mind when I was trying to compare it to something else were sororities and fraternities, and something that I basically only heard about from my friends, or I don't know, just generally. So it was really, really interesting to experience it firsthand. But also I really like how inclusive they are, and that they're not divided into, men and women or boys and girls. It's just everyone is interacting with everyone, and there's a lot of different activities that they're organizing. It can be sports, it can be cultural, it can be bars and pubs and lunches, and you can volunteer, you can take part as a participant. So there's a lot of room for your own involvement, and this is another thing that I really appreciate about it. And I also love how our work as students is being appreciated, because we get a lot of thank you events and thank you parties, and there's a lot of room for socializing and meeting new people. And that's how I've met I think most of my close friends. And it's my 3rd year. I started being active in my 1st year. So I'm really glad I made that decision. And I think it's something very unique to Lund. So definitely one of my favorite things, apart from the campus, because that's another story.
Definitely. And that's a great overview of the nations as well. I know that's one of the really common questions we get, because it is quite a unique concept. Perfect. And Livius, what about your favorite things?
I really love the vibe that Lund has. because it's mostly students, it really feels sometimes when you meet someone that's not a student, it's like, oh, you're not a student. It's kind of like a weird thing. I think most people in Lund are students, and it's got a really, it's quite busy, but it's a small town. I don't really like big cities because sometimes it's a bit overwhelming. Having lived in London for 7 years, it's a bit overwhelming at times. But I think it's a good proportion of students to the city, to the events that you can do. I mean, I've seen also one of the questions here was, how do you deal with the darkness in Sweden? And that's one of the points, that there are so many things to do in Lund and so many different activities that it kind of keeps you busy and kind of helps you forget about darkness. But yeah.
Great, thank you guys. We have a couple questions popping up here in the Q&A, which is great to see. The first one I'll just answer very quickly, which someone's wondering which campus the Faculty of Law is situated in. We don't have any law students here today, but it is in Lund, and it's actually, I think, in my personal opinion, the best location of any of the faculty buildings, because it's right in the heart of the city. It's about 2 blocks away from the train station, 2 blocks away from the cathedral and the city center. So they have a really great location there at the Faculty of Law. But of course, everything in Lund is very close. You could sort of walk across the whole thing in an hour or bike across in 15, 20 minutes. But a great question here, that's a really common question we get as well for everyone, is how much does the darkness in winter affect your motivation, and how do you deal with it? I know that's something a lot of people are very worried about coming into a country that does get a lot darker and a lot colder in the winter. So maybe I'll just open that up to anyone, whoever would like to share something about your tips for the darkness.
I want to start, if that is okay.
Of course.
I'm from Colombia again. So in Colombia, we don't face this change of lights during the year. We have the same daylight all year. So for me, it was really difficult the first year. I have to admit that. Everybody says like, oh, you're supposed to be ready for the cold because the winter is really cold. But to be honest, the biggest challenge is the darkness. So in my case, well, here they recommend you to take vitamin D, and you have to do it because you're gonna feel the difference if you don't. Also, if you like coffee, coffee is your best friend in this time of the year. But most important is like wear a watch. It don't have to be like this, but wear a watch, because you're gonna feel like you're gonna waste your time if you don't. So you have to realize, like, even though it might be 3 p.m. and it's already getting dark or whatever, if you are wearing a watch, you're gonna feel like you are not wasting your time, that you still have some time before the bedtime. So that is important. Also, try to decorate your place with lights. These Christmas lights are really good, so you can use them. Or try to do your place comfy, like you feel like you are in a good place, beyond, of course, the fact that you are living there for a while to do your studies or whatever. Is important because it's a way to feel like you're going to survive the darkness, basically. And also, and most important, try to not isolate yourself too much. Even though last year we were facing some restrictions due to COVID, it's important to realize, like, it's good to keep in contact with your friends or classmates and talk to them and try to meet them if it's possible to do that. I would say that as my tips to survive to the darkness. And it's not that bad in the end if you do that. I mean, you eventually gonna get used to. It's just, I would say, the first year that is the challenging. And also, oh, I forgot, if you like to work out, you also can do that, like go for a run or go to the gym, depends, it's up to you. Yeah.
Really great tips there. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add in about dealing with winter?
I think I'm trying to go to sleep early and then wake up early so that I can get as much sun as possible. So usually nowadays I go to sleep like before 10 or around 10 and then wake up at 7 so that I can be awake during the daytime. And I also try to finish my study as much as possible before it gets dark. So I think that's also one thing I'm doing to deal with the darkness.
Some great tips. I forgot to mention in the beginning, but I also came to Lund from the US originally to study my master's in applied cultural analysis before I started working for the university. And what I always found, I actually found it the opposite, Catalina, that my first year was not as bad as the second year, because the first year it's sort of new and exciting, like, oh, I live in this dark country. Wow, something, culturally different or different, about the world. But then the second year is when it started to get to me. But what my friends and I did is we tried to start saving up things that we knew were fun to do sort of indoors that were free around the area. So there's a lot of museums and things around both in Lund, Malmö, all over Skåne that are free or very cheap for students. So we started, anytime we found something like that we wanted to do, we'd save it intentionally for winter so that we had all these kind of fun, exciting day trips that we could go on that were indoors, so it wasn't so cold outside, but still it felt like we were doing something and getting to see something. And then in general, I always just try to take a walk or make sure at some point during the day I'm outside in the light, even if everything else is busy.
I would say maybe it's about the experience. Of course, where you're from is important, but also how you live the experience. Last year, when we arrived here, at least that was my case, COVID was getting worse and worse, so we were facing some restrictions, and that also was like hitting with the darkness itself. So that's why in my case, was the opposite. This year, I didn't feel like blue or something because the darkness is quite the opposite. Now I feel like motivated to go to the gym, for instance. So yeah, but of course it depends. I would say a lot of factors here. As you said, you came from the US, and also you are used to somehow to those change of lights. My case was the opposite. In Colombia, you have the same all year. So you have in the mindset, like the day start 5:50 a.m., 50 something in the morning, and the day is over after 6 p.m. So it's really, it's shocking when you realize like, okay, it's 3 p.m. and it's already dark. What happened with the day? And then it's 9 a.m. in the morning and it's just getting lights because the sunrise is just show up. So it's like, oh my goodness, what happened? So that's the thing. Yeah.
Exactly. It can be quite individual for sure, but you will find your own ways to manage it, rest assured. So we have quite a lot of questions coming in now, which is great. So I'll try and move through them so we can get to everyone. So first at the top here with 3 upvotes, are there any university organized sport activities or sports facilities provided by the university? So we don't have university sports teams the way that you might in some countries like in the US, but there are a lot of clubs and organizations and also public facilities like provided from the city or public teams that you can join for sports. I don't know if anyone here has been involved in any sports activities. Just sort of shout out. I don't think we have anyone here today. I know we have some other student ambassadors if you want to search through and chat in the link in the chat to some of our students have been involved in the sports, but there's a lot of, yeah.
Yeah, just like very briefly, because it's quite ironic because I'm not a sports person myself, but I know that a lot of nations organize have like designated sports committees. And for example, last year, my nation organized like a session on like paddle, which is kind of similar to tennis, and I've never heard about it. I thought that was pretty interesting, and that's how I got to try it. But there's also like a lot of regular things going on, and there's a lot of student discounts on gyms and sports facilities. So it's quite convenient if you actually are a sports person.
Definitely. Great. And then the next question, if you want to participate in a nation, how can you get to know them and choose one? Maybe, Aga, I know you've been probably the most involved in nations of everyone here, so maybe if you want to take that as well.
Sure. From my own experience, the most helpful thing is attending the student fair that takes place at the beginning of each semester. It's called Helsingielet, although you don't need to remember that. It will be heavily advertised on the campus, but it takes place in a big hall, and there's basically all of the nations and all of the associations and also the student unions, basically anything that might interest students, and you can talk to their representatives and you can ask them all sorts of things. They will also most likely try to bribe you with sweets and merch and stuff like that, so you can make up your own mind. But you can also visit them and see, you know, what the nation house looks like, what the, I don't know, daily activities look like. So you get them all more like a well-rounded insight into what a nation is and which one do you want to join.
Great. I know, unfortunately, the last 2 years or so, when everyone else here has come to Lund, we haven't been able to have as many of the opening activities like that as we have. But hopefully, fingers crossed, by the time all of you in the audience would get to Lund next August, we will be able to have things like Helsingsiet and be able to visit the nations.
Yeah,
I would also just add in there that people often put a lot of emphasis on, you know, it's so important to make sure I choose the right nation, but you can visit all of the nations no matter which one you choose. So which one you choose is really in the end not super important. That's just essentially which one will get your money for that you're paying to join, but you can still attend events at all of them, and you can switch nations after the first semester or two if you decide, oh, I really spend a lot of my time at this one, I want to join that one instead. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add about how you chose your nation or anything about, yeah, Trevina?
Yeah, so yeah, when I arrived here, which was this August, we didn't have like a huge like gathering, but there was an online Helsingsiet. I didn't attend that one, unfortunately. It was like too busy, but they also had like some video conferences with like different nations, like Helsingkona and Kalmar. They had events and things. But what really helped me decide was, I think on the Lund University page, there is a website or a web page where you can see all the different student nations and see what they do, because they all have like different characteristics. So I'm part of a Sydskonska nation, and there it's like a lot of music themes and music themed clubs. I don't think we have like too much of sports activities there, but we do like a lot of sittings and have like interesting acts come every night. I would say that's a good place to start, and Facebook is really the best. What I found difference from like I guess my Netherlands experience, my Dutch experience, was that more students are involved in Facebook than like say WhatsApp or other messaging apps. So if you like send a message to them, say, hey, I'm really interested, I would like to get to know you better. Like, what does your nation do? I'm sure they'd be willing to talk to you. And I have a friend who actually was able to get housing from Sydskonska. He like messaged them, I think 6 months before he arrived, because of the pandemic, there's a lot of delays in his exchange program, but he was able to get a room by the time he arrived. So that's also a good way to reach out and to get some affordable housing. So
Definitely. And that leads us directly into the next question, which is about how difficult it is to find housing for EU students in particular. So the reason it is particular to EU students is for those who aren't aware, if you're coming to Lund as a non-EU citizen, so because you pay tuition, you also have a housing guarantee through LU accommodation. So you will get guaranteed housing. However, if you're coming from the EU, you are responsible for finding your own housing. So perhaps we'll go to Livius. I'm guessing you were coming from within the EU, so you had this situation.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a little bit difficult. I mean, you really have to look ahead of time. So don't look 2 weeks before you come here. But yeah, I think you just have to have an open mind and not be really fussy, because it is kind of hard to find places in Lund. But there are also around surrounding cities. My friend lives in Bjärred, for example, which is on the coast, and it takes about 20 minutes, half an hour to get here. There are people that commute from Malmo, Helsingborg. So there are many places. I personally applied for the AF Postade lottery, which is a housing organization kind of tied to the university, and they do a lottery every July, I think, or June. And then you get a time, and then you can apply for accommodation. So I was lucky, and I got a pretty good time. But also with those as well, we have to also be patient, even if you don't get the best time. But yeah, I would say the key word is patience, and also like look around, look for everything people post on Facebook. You can look at different websites. There is Poland, where people advertise their own private accommodation. There's AF Postade, there's the nations that You usually have to be involved in the activities that give you points, and then you can apply. But then they also have opportunities for newcomers to apply to kind of like their own lotteries, or each nation has a different. So make sure you look into them. But yeah, I would say it's not impossible. Like, you will find something. So it's not a bigger story, but the more you look, the more chance you have of finding someone nice.
Great. And Aga, I think you're our other EU student here today. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, because I've heard about a lot of scams that were taking place at Bupolan, and it's something that thankfully I did not experience, although that's how I found my first room when I moved to Lund. But when I first met my landlady, I remember she was quite surprised that I didn't ask her about like any personal details or like the personal number, because apparently it's like a public information in Sweden, and you can Google a person and you can Google their personal number and see if they're, you know, a legitimate I don't know, property owner or a potential land person, and that's how we can verify it. So I would really advise you to do it, especially if you can't come beforehand and check out the accommodation yourself. Yeah, but other than that, I think Livius covered everything. One thing that I didn't know was the student nation accommodation, but he also mentioned that. But a lot of them reserve some apartments or rooms for the novice students, the new students. But there's a catch, like you need to sign up to be their member, but I think it's a fair price. And usually that accommodation is quite nice, and a lot of them are quite central. So I would advise you to look into that, and definitely verify the potential land person.
And that's where you are now, Aga, in nation accommodation, correct?
Yeah, actually, yeah, it's really nice. I have my own apartment. I have my own kitchen right here and my own bathroom. I feel like it's a very like a Swedish thing to have a separate room, and most of the dorms, like, you know, corridors, etc., they're only meant for one person, but sometimes you need to share the kitchen with a bunch of other people, which is nice for socializing. If you're an extrovert, I think that's the perfect, you know, opportunity to also make friends and get to know people and get close with them. If you're an introvert, you might prefer that. Yeah, either way, I'm living at the nation right now, and I'm really, really happy about that. And the price is also fair. So all in all, it's good. Just make sure to look into it as soon as you get the admission results.
Great, exactly. That's always our biggest advice, is if you start looking as soon as you're admitted, usually something works out. So the people who have problems are the people who don't start looking until, you know, end of July, and just explore all of your options that you have available, definitely. And this ties a little bit into our next most popular question here, which is also about living situations. And I was wondering what choices there are and what would you recommend if you want to meet new people? Corridor rooms, dorms versus shared flats, things like that. So perhaps we can talk to our non-EU students here, and as there's several different options in LU accommodation. I don't know if all three of you actually chose LU accommodation or not, but what would you recommend as far as your living situations? Maybe Heewon, we'll start with you.
I didn't choose LU accommodation. I searched for by myself in somewhere in Malmö, but I know several like non-EU students who are living in dorms or shared flats or corridors. And I definitely recommend, if you want to meet new people, like living in shared dorms or like shared kitchen, corridor. Yeah, I think they do a lot of like parties, corridor parties, and sometimes they cook together and eat together. So it's really a best option to meet new people and engage in social activities.
Definitely. Trevina, did you live in LU accommodation or?
Yeah, currently in my studio, so I'm not very extroverted, but I do like interacting with people, so I prefer to live by myself. But yeah, if you want to meet new people, I would suggest, yeah, maybe a corridor room would be nice. Though I would say, like with any shared accommodation, it always depends on who you live with if it's going to work out. So for me, I personally just had like too many situations where it didn't work out. I mean, other people have been luckier, and they have like nice dinner parties where everyone gets to cook like a different meal every day. So yeah, and nation housing is also very good if you want like to have easy access to parties and then also like have your own personal space separate from that.
Definitely. Anything to add there, Catalina? I know you're staying in Malmö. Are you in one of the
Yeah.
LU accommodations in Malmö?
Yes, I'm in the LU accommodation. There is also a studio flat just for me. So I have everything, the kitchen, the bathroom, everything is for me, which I like the most because in my case, for instance, I really like to cook and I'm really picky if I have to share the kitchen. I mean, and those kind of things are the ones that you have to consider the most when you are looking for a place. So because yeah, you can socialize, for instance. I mean, I would say it's harder if you are living in a place like mine because everybody is in their own spaces, but in the same time, if you have the, I don't know, the possibility to talk with your neighbors somehow and you can start to interact with them, that's good. And it's another way to actually share with them, and you don't have to share the kitchen, which is amazing in my case because really I really like to cook and I'm really picky with my kitchen. So yeah, that's why. So for me, I will say the advice is more about it's important to socialize, yes, but it's most important how you see yourself living in the next year, 2 years. I mean, if you are more comfortable living alone or having the fact to, you know, share the kitchen and also to share the cleaning, because that is the thing when you are living in a corridor room that you also have to share the cleaning, and which is of course good, and it's a good way also to develop the skills, but still, yeah.
Definitely. And I think I was in the same boat as you, Catalina, when I studied at Lund. I stayed in LU accommodation in a studio flat, but I also wanted to make sure that I got to meet some people. So as soon as we moved in, tried to organize like a meet and greet for all the people on our floor. And that way we sort of became a little closer than I think you normally are in studio apartments. So it really is up to you also how much effort you want to put into meeting your neighbors if you aren't in a shared space, things like that for sure.
Funny story though, I met one of my closest friends in the laundry room here in my building.
See, you can meet friends anywhere.
Yeah, it was super random. It was my first month in the building and I was actually doing like the cleaning, of course, and I had an issue with the laundry machine and I saw her and I did a question and she was super kind and everything, and now is one of my closest friends. So yeah, I mean, you can meet people even in this random situation, so it's up to you.
Okay. And the next question we have is, do you have the opportunity to work a part-time job? I have kind of some standard advice we give about this from our office, but I'll first kind of open it up to the floor if there's anyone who is working while studying. I would like to share. Livius?
I have kind of a small part-time job. I work for the orchestra, which I'm also part of, selling tickets for events and arranging chairs and welcoming people. And it's only a couple of hours, like usually 3 hours a week or something like that. But I think it's kind of hard to balance, to have the work-life balance, because the university, like you really need to focus on it unless you're really smart and you only need to read, for a couple of hours after the lectures. Then you really don't have that much time with all the activities. And you also need Swedish for many jobs. I applied for a lot of jobs. I think I applied for 20, 25 jobs, and yeah, most of them require Swedish. So it is kind of hard in both ways to get one and then to also achieve that work-life balance, because you just don't want to sacrifice your studies for working, because the studies are the main reason why you are here. Yeah, but maybe there are some small part-time jobs like mine where it's only a couple of hours a week to kind of like help you a little bit.
Exactly. You took the words right out of my mouth. So that's typically our advice as well, is that there are a lot more students than there are jobs, first of all, and most of them do require Swedish. So while it is possible to find part-time jobs, it's usually quite unusual, or you need to be very persistent. And as you said, I mean, your focus should be on studying, so making sure that you actually have time for working part-time. So we always recommend that you treat finding a job as sort of a bonus. If you come to Lund and you're able to find one, that's great, but you should never treat it as your main source of funding while you're in Lund, because I think it's very unrealistic to think that you'll come to Lund, find a job that will cover your full rent and living expenses and things. That's not very realistic, definitely. And then another great question here about how busy you are during the week. How much time do you actually take to study? And I know this can vary a lot depending on the faculty. So maybe we'll actually go around and hear from everyone on this. So maybe Trevina, we'll start with you since you're here representing the engineering faculty today.
Yeah. So for my program, it's a bit different from like the typical like 5-year computer science program that the like usual students would take here in Lund, since they are mostly Swedish. But for me, I find like the 40 hours a week guideline is pretty much, yeah, I found that to be pretty much true. It is a full-time job essentially to study, and that's also including lectures and doing project work. And sometimes it can be like a little bit more than that, but that depends if you want to like go the extra mile on your assignment. But normally I have some time to enjoy like the activities, go out on the weekend, have a day off during the week. So I find it's quite manageable, but I will just note I don't work, I just study. So.
Okay. And how much time are you actually spending in class versus other sort of independent work?
I would say it varies, because like right now I'm doing well, my courses so far have been like mostly assignment based or sometimes project based. So we do, for like my project based courses, normally have maybe, I don't know, 4-6 hours of lecture a week for that class. Assignment based courses normally would have like a little bit more, like around 8 hours. But then you also have tutorial sessions, and those can be around 2 hours. So yeah, like about, I don't know, maybe 16, 20, I'm not entirely sure, like the assignment-based course, but the project-based course is definitely less, but they expect you to do more outside of class. And that's really where the bulk of the time spent comes in, then also preparing for exams as well.
Definitely, great. And Catalina, how about in public health?
Well, as a program from the medicine faculty, it's quite difficult. I mean, it's not impossible, of course, but it's difficult. All the free time that you can have during the course is a lie, because you have to do a lot of things. You have to read a lot, you have to prepare your group assignments as well as your individual assignments, but that is not impossible to have a social life or time for your interests. So in my case, for instance, I try to work out at least 3-4 times per week. I mean, in the beginning, you might feel like with more ambitious, like, oh, I want to do it, I don't know, every single day. But in the end, you also have to take time to do nothing. And that is important. So in my case, even though I try to prioritize the workout because it's a good way to release some stress and cope with anxiety and so on, I also try to do nothing or try to cook, because as I said, I really like to cook. So for instance, I like to do some bakery, like the famous cinnamon buns from Sweden. So those kind of things. And also I try to find some time to share with my friends, which is challenging sometimes because everybody has a different schedule and so on, but still it's a good way. But yes, the program is quite demanding. And also I'm working remotely, but I have a job, and I have to prioritize my studies, as Livius says before, because it's the main purpose to be here. So I have to negotiate sometimes with my clients and everything, and that's important in the end. So I would say, yeah, if you organize yourself good enough, and if you are, I don't know, in my case, I have to learn to keep attached to my calendar. I would say that's the key. But also try to be careful not to be too strict, because you really need to feel like you have time to do, again, as I said, nothing. But yeah, that's my experience so far.
Great. And I see we only have about 15 minutes left and we have a lot of questions. So maybe I'll ask for the other three of you, do you find that that's similar for your programs, that you're having a lot of more independent group work, lab work, and not as much time in actual class, but still a lot of time studying? Seen nods from Heewon and Aga and Livius. Yeah, so that typically I would say for the majority of the programs in Sweden, that's what you'll find, is you're not going to be in class from 9 to 5 every day. So sometimes it often feels in the beginning like you have a lot of free time, but you quickly realize that that free time is meant to be taken up by group work, independent assignments, reading, things like that. Yeah, I think a lot of nods. So perhaps everyone agrees there. Great. Let's see. So to quickly try and go through some more questions here. question at the top now is, are there any international students that brought their family, either their partner or children with them for masters? And please share your experiences. I don't know if anyone here today did that. I don't think so, but we do have some student ambassadors who did that. So you can talk to them about their experience. I'm thinking specifically of Cecilia, for example, but I'm pasting the links here again. You can see a place where you can chat with current students. So there are some students who brought their family. It is possible to do. The one thing to note is for accommodation, if you want to live with LU accommodation or really any of the student-based accommodation, your partner needs to also have been admitted to a program at Lund in order for you to both live in the student accommodation. So most likely you will need to find private accommodation in that case, but it is possible. Next up, in terms of winter clothes, would you recommend bringing them with you when you come to Lund or buying them in Sweden? I guess I'll open this up for anybody who has some tips. Livius?
I would say buy them at home. Buy anything you can and bring here at home because the prices here are insane. There are obviously more options in terms of winter clothing here, I think, than if you come from Colombia, for example. But yeah, I would say bring your winter coats, put them on you on the plane, and you'll save some space. If you have the space.
I would say, as Livius says, if you are from Colombia or from a country like mine, buy the clothes here, because it's quite the opposite. In Colombia, it's more expensive, the winter clothes, because we don't have this weather. I mean, even though Bogota is a cool city, for instance, I'm from Bogota, and yes, we can face some, I don't know, maybe also 5-6 degrees and sometime in the year. It's not the same at all. So, and it's really expensive to buy those clothes in Colombia. So I would say, if you came from Colombia or a country like that, buy the clothes here. Yeah.
Okay.
Great points. Yeah, it very much, I think, depends where you're from. There are also a lot of secondhand shops in Sweden where you can buy winter clothes for a bit cheaper as well. So that's an option to take into account. Okay. Next question, what housing choices are available for transgender students? I guess the short and sweet answer to this is all of them. We don't have any gender separated housing in Lund, so any housing in a corridor or a studio apartment or anything will be open to people of all genders, so everything. Are there faculty or program opening weeks, as Trevina talked about in the beginning? So we do have orientation weeks in the beginning, and each faculty has a little bit of something, either introductory meetings or something. Would anyone like to share your experience with attending orientation? I know the last year or two has been a bit different than normal since we've had mostly hybrid orientation, but is there anyone who took part in any of those activities? Yeah, Catalina?
I'm talking too much, sorry. In my program, we have 2 days, that is the introduction days. And in the second day, for instance, we have the Q&A session, which is amazing because you can talk with the students from the second year and learn from their experiences as well, and try to answer as much questions as you have. And in the first day, the faculty is super nice and they give you a really good lunch and everything, and they spoil you a little bit, so it's nice if you want to feel like at home in your new home in Lund.
Yeah, I know not all faculties are the same thing as the engineering faculty, like with the overalls and the activities. I know in the biology department, at least, we do kind of a similar thing, but on a much smaller scale. But if I didn't attend those, but even if you don't go to those, each department, I think, has an an open day for the first, like the first welcome day, where you meet all the lecturers, the course coordinator, and yeah, it's usually tea, coffee, some snacks, and it's really nice to meet everyone. What we did was we did an orientation day, so we went around the buildings looking for the different places, meeting the different lecturers, and it was yeah, I think it's a really nice way. But I think most places would do something like that at least.
Yeah, definitely. Great. Thank you, guys. I had a question in the chat about coming to Lund specifically with kids and registering them for school. So I've actually sent you a link directly in the text chat where you can find more information about that. So again, I don't think we have any students here familiar with that process. We also have a question about opening a bank account and getting registered if you're studying a one-year program. I also don't think anyone here today is on a one-year program. So I'll send you or send in the chat. There is actually, if you look at the links in the chat again, to send you over and over again to our current students, but we have several current students, mostly the business programs that are 1 year, but several of them have actually written blogs about their tips for getting bank accounts and things that you need to take into account if you are here for 1 year, because if you're here for 1 year, you don't get a Swedish person number, which is sort of what registers you officially. So it is a little bit more difficult to do things like banking, but there are some workarounds. So I'd encourage you to go and check out that link, Chatting with Students, and you'll be able to read several blogs that they've written and talk to the student who's written it. Next, we have how is going out life and how did the pandemic change it? That's, I'm sure, quite a big question. So I'll leave that open as well for anyone who would like to jump in. I'm sure it's also probably changed quite different for those of you who are second year students last year versus this year. And again, hopefully there won't be too many pandemic restrictions on that by the time everyone else gets here. But if anyone would like to jump into that, Livius?
Yeah, I would say even last year, as many of you probably know, Sweden didn't have the toughest restrictions. So there were some smaller events, at least in my nation. There were some pubs and clubs limited to 50 people. So yeah, there was still some socializing possibilities, and also going to cafes and meeting your course mates. Sometimes, even if the course is online, you can go to a cafe after and chat with them. Now it's obviously much more open, but actually not that different. Like now, yeah, you can have clubs with more people, but kind of similar events still happen, but are less restricted. But yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities anyway for most nations, and you will definitely find something that you like. I personally don't like, I like going to clubs, but not like the usual club music. So my nation sometimes have Latino nights, they have 80s music, they have all different kinds of events. So there really is something for everybody. And now that they're more open, like, well, now there's technically no restrictions for those kind of events. So you could go to any.
Great. Anything anyone else wants to add there? Okay. And now a great question, something that's, I know something a lot of people are worried about before coming here, is how does not speaking Swedish affect your social life? And I would maybe even expand this to say, you know, what's the experience in Sweden in general if you don't speak Swedish? Is it something that you feel is really a detriment, or is it possible to get by with English?
I would say overall is you can live here without to speak Swedish and you can survive for sure. In my case, the only thing that annoyed me that I'm not able to speak Swedish yet, although I can understand a little bit now, is when I'm going to the doctor. I don't know why, for some reason, they are not able to speak fluently English. So sometimes you have this struggle, try to make yourself, like, your life easier when you have to talk about pain, which is frustrating because even, especially if English is not your main language either. So you're gonna face a big struggle there, and it will be easier if you can speak Swedish in that way. But good news, first of all, you don't have to go to the doctor all the time, which is good. And second of all, you can also find a way to explain yourself. So it's not a big deal. I mean, it's frustrating, but it's not a big deal. And overall, you can survive without learning Swedish. But it's nice if you want to understand better the culture and everything, that you try to your best to learn a little bit. Yeah.
For my experience, I found it a bit opposite. Like Catalina had mentioned with the healthcare, like for me, it turned into like a nearly life-threatening situation, and that I don't speak Swedish fluently, but I was having trouble communicating to the doctor. I have a lot of chronic illnesses, and some of which need medication, and without medication, I could potentially die. And I was running out of medication, and I was trying to communicate, like, I really need this to be filled. I was kind of in the no man's land because I know they're quite strict on like who can fill prescriptions here and what kind of prescriptions they can fill. So between like my GP and a neurologist, that I had an appointment scheduled months, like way after I would run out. And I had to actually enlist my Swedish speaking friend to help bridge that gap so they could like finally understand, like, oh, this is important. Like, you actually do need this medication. Let's work on it. So I find that it is quite critical if you have a chronic illness or you have like something that you take medication for regularly, that I also have a condition which I need to follow up with a doctor regularly, that you have someone there who speaks Swedish fluently. You can also request a translator when you go to a doctor's appointment as well. I think that's something that wasn't explained to me in the beginning, and I think that's what really caused the problem to occur later on when I had a medication shortage, because I don't think she fully understood what I was trying to convey in that first appointment, which led to this problem later on. But in terms of like the social life, I think it's different for every program. But for my program, or my student union, that's a computer science. So most students that start there, they are Swedish speaking, and I think the first 3 years are mostly Swedish speaking. It's like all the signs are in Swedish, and all the announcements are in Swedish. What was really nice this year was that they finally opened up the guild to international students, and so we had like a group that would translate the content that was posted into English. But of course, they are students as well, so they don't have enough time. So it can sometimes be a bit, I would say, isolating if you really want to get to know other people who may not be in your specific program. Because my program is like English speaking, but there is only 8 people, and there's like hundreds, maybe thousands of people in the computer science program at Lund that you want to get to know. But I find like with the nations though, they are more inclusive in that they provide both Swedish and English translations. So it's easier to get involved in the nation life, I find, in my experience than with my student guild in the guild.
Great, thank you for sharing. I'm sorry to hear that about the healthcare. I think if you can, try and find new doctors, because I've always had very fluent English-speaking doctors, but perhaps I've gotten lucky in that case. But some good advice there either way, that you can request a translator. That's very important for everyone to know. Heewon?
Yeah, you can do that. I mean, if you are going to a specialist, they offer you actually the translator. But if you're going to the Bar Centralen, it's not that common all the time. So I would say that's the difference. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I think legally they're required to give you a translator if you request it, but it's just maybe they're not as used to having those requests. But definitely advocate for your rights there for sure. But any other thoughts to add on learning Swedish? Has anyone taken advantage of the opportunities to learn Swedish while you're here? We have some hands raised. Livius, so you unmuted. Maybe you want to share briefly.
I've done two months of Swedish for immigrants, because it takes a while to get in the system, 3 months to get in. But yeah, I think it's useful if you want to live here or permanently or over long term. I actually dropped them recently because I don't have the time, and I've like changed my plans for the future. But yeah, I think it's if you have the time and energy, it's useful to learn. I don't think it's essential unless you want to live here. But yeah.
Yeah, great. And the Swedish for Immigrants, Livius mentions, is a free program offered by the government that is basically free Swedish classes. So that's something, if you are interested in learning a little bit, you can take advantage there. But well, we only have about 2 minutes left, so time has flown today. I always like to try and quickly end if by asking everyone if you have any last advice or tips or anything you would share to someone who's coming to Lund, or a final thing that you wish you had been told, or just some advice about how to really make the most of your time in Lund. Perhaps if we can do it very quick, like 10, 15, 20-second snippets, we'll go around. We'll start with you, Heewon.
For me, I recommend people, like especially who are not used to learn in English, their academic bachelor, then I really recommend to practice to read some academic literatures in English before coming, because I found it a bit difficult to like read efficiently in the beginning, the difficult words, terms in English. And also for those, especially from Asian countries, I was afraid of like having no Asian ingredients in Lund and in Sweden, so I brought a lot of them, and that brought me have to give up on many things to bring other things. But I found out that they actually have many Asian markets in Malmö and Lund, and they have basically everything you need. So I don't think you don't need to worry about that. Yeah.
That's some great points there. Thank you. Trevina, your final tips?
Yeah, I guess my suggestion would be to keep yourself open to opportunities, even if for some reason everything's in Swedish, use your Google Translates and just like put yourself in an event and make connections. I think the most important thing is, well, when you're studying abroad, besides your program, to get, to know this culture and the people and the country that you're staying in, as they can tend to be quite helpful in the end when you really need help, like in my case. And also just a learning experience. And also, yeah, try and learn a bit of Swedish. It can help a bit. Yeah.
Definitely, thank you. Catalina?
I would say if you are feeling overwhelmed because everything is new for you and you feel like maybe you are not in your best space or whatever, you can also request for help in the university. They have a mental health center that is focused for the students, because a lot of us sometimes we can cope with anxiety because of studies or besides the studies and everything. So don't hesitate to ask for help if you need it. That's my final advice.
Great advice. Livius?
I would say, yeah, take an opportunity of all the events that you can do. If you play an instrument, I recommend joining the university orchestra, because that's not really well advertised, I feel, come to the music events, because yeah, it allows you to develop yourself even more in that field and to meet other people. But yeah, there's a lot of events here. Make sure you don't take too much or too little. Find a good life-work balance, because I took a bit too many on. There were a bit too many that I liked and I didn't have before. So I was like, okay, I have to do everything. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Aga, any of your final last advice?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to second Livius and like don't overburden yourself with all of those events that are going on campus, because there's hundreds of them. But I wanted to advise you to check out like different events from like different associations, like different entities. For example, don't limit yourself only to student unions, or only to the student nations, or only to associations, because all of them are very, very different and they have different things to offer. So make sure to check them out equally, and just see what suits you best, so you don't miss out on the best bet, so to say. And also when it comes to associations, I think there's plenty of them that are targeted at international specifically. So if you're worried that you don't speak Swedish and you might not fit in right into the environment, then I would advise you to check them out. And also some Facebook groups, because each year there's also like a Facebook group called like Lund University International Students, and I also took advantage of it. So I do recommend checking that out. And I think that's it from me.
Wonderful. Well, a huge thank you to all of our panelists today. We've had some great discussions, great tips shared here. So hopefully it was helpful to everyone in our audience. And thank you to the audience. You gave us some great questions to help us along with today. It's always fun to see what questions everyone has to ask. And before I let you go, I want to just draw your attention to the links that I've put in the chat. I pasted them here again, just in case anyone has joined since the beginning of the session. So if you want more information about our programs, you can find in the first link there the list of all of our programs. So if especially someone was studying something here today that really intrigued you, you can check that out there. The second link, you can find more information about student life. So if you want to learn more about the nations or the student unions, for example, some of the different traditions that we have here at Lund, that's the place you can check that out. The third link is for how to contact my team, the International Recruitment Office. So if you have any questions about the application process, scholarships, anything like that, we're always here to help you. Important to note that we are currently experiencing a problem where a lot of our emails go into spam. So make sure that if you send us a question there, you check your spam for the next few days, because we will reply to you. It just might end up in spam. We're having a bit of an issue there. So make sure to check that out. The fourth link is where you can chat with over 80 of our current students and some alumni, including the majority of the students that are here with us today. So if you have a question for anyone in particular, or if you just want to explore and find someone from the program that you're going to study, or from your country, there's a lot of different students you can chat to there. And finally, as I mentioned, we have a lot of other great events coming up for you, including 2 later today that will be about how to apply to masters and to bachelors that'll walk you through all those steps, and a lot of other things happening throughout the rest of the semester. So check out our other events and we hope to see you soon. And with that, I'll wish everyone a great rest of your day. Thanks for being here with us and hope to see you soon in Lund.